Hey guys, tonight we begin with a quiet question, a whisper from the Cold War corridors, where fear and curiosity braided together into something unusual. Tonight we gently open the curtains on a story the government once kept in the dark. Project Stargate, a decades-long exploration of remote viewing, psychic experiments, and the possibility that human consciousness might reach further than we imagined. We will move slowly. For the next hour or two, and across many chapters to come, I'll guide you through what prompted those first experiments, who the people were, the moments that unsettle analysts, and the echoes that still ripple through intelligence work today. We'll draw from declassified records, eyewitness memories, and the quieter, less official rumours that feed a room full of late-night speculation. I'll walk you through both the documented facts and the plausible tales that make this subject feel immediate, not to convince you, but to let the possibility settle like fog around the edges of what you already know. Before we settle in and begin our peaceful journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if what I share here truly resonates with you. Your support helps me create more of these videos, and if you feel like it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see the many corners of the world where we connect. Now, dim the lights, make yourself comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together as we explore what lies ahead. Chapter 1. The Fear That Started It All. Imagine a long, silvered night of politics and dread. The 1970s, a world of satellites and spies, where every advantage seemed to matter. Nations stockpiled secrets, and intelligence services listened for any unusual whisper that might give them an edge. In that hush, a rumour reached the analysts, reports that across the Iron Curtain, researchers were quietly probing the human mind for unusual capabilities. Remote perception, psychotronic devices, and experiments that sounded like folklore told by engineers. The story of Stargate begins there, not as an immediate faith in the paranormal, but as a pragmatic, anxious question. What if the other side had discovered some method we could not yet measure? This anxiety was not born of mysticism alone. It arose from memos and reports, and, later, from pages released to the public that reveal the official concern. Analysts in the United States read intelligence suggesting Soviet and Eastern Bloc research into parapsychology and non-local perception, and they asked themselves whether this represented an operational threat. Those documents, preserved now in public archives, show an agency that wanted to be methodical and cautious, but also worried. Picture the quiet rooms where this worry became action. Research contracts tendered, scientists approached, and a tiny, secretive stream of funding set aside within larger black budgets. These were not headline grabbers. They were internal lines on spreadsheets, dotted initials on classified memoranda, a low hum of bureaucracy deciding it was safer to test the possibility than to ignore it. In the late 1970s, this cluster of work coalesced into programs that would later be recognized under names like Grill Flame and, more popularly, Stargate. The program's roots at places like the Stanford Research Institute, where early experiments in controlled remote viewing were run, show a sidestep from mainstream research into a frontier that intelligence agencies treated as potentially exploitable. Listen with me now to the texture of that fear. It was practical, not theatrical. Imagine an analyst flipping through a dossier late at night and pausing at a translated summary. Soviet research has produced repeatable anomalous perception under controlled conditions. The paragraph's tone is clinical, but the implication is naked. If the Soviet Union could reliably perceive hidden installations, or sense the location of weapons or personnel without conventional reconnaissance, the strategic balance might shift in a single, unsettling, way. For men and women who spent their careers thinking probabilistically, that single conditional, if true, was enough to stir action. Recordings and overviews later released point to that precise calculus. They could not afford to assume the threat non-existent. Now, to fold a quieter, believable layer into this documented picture, imagine an internal phrase, passed between analysts in a whisper and never officially recorded, that later found its way into rumour. If even 10% of this is real, we're already behind. It's a sentence the archives do not show, but it captures the tone of cautious urgency that permeated locked doors and compartmented briefings. Whether or not those exact words were ever penned, they illustrate the emotional logic that sent scientists and military officials down an unusual path. That phrase sits well with the cold, clerical language of classified memos, a human heartbeat beneath clipped sentences. This is part of the quieter, believable layer we'll revisit as we meet the people who answer the call. Think of the first meetings, a conference room lit by a single lamp, a handful of officers and civilian researchers, and a pile of experimental results. The evidence was messy. Some sessions produced transcripts and sketches that matched real places or events. Others yielded nothing of use. But in several reported instances, later summarized and discussed in declassified reports, analysts found patterns and repeatable techniques they could formalize into controlled protocols. The work moved from ad hoc experiments toward a systematized approach: blind targets, sealed envelopes, double-blind controls, and the careful recording of sensory impressions as if the mind itself were an instrument to be calibrated. These reports, now public in the CIA reading room, show an attempt to graft scientific rigor onto something stubbornly elusive. Breathe in these details as if they're the slow rhythm of a tide. There was also a social dimension to the fear, a mix of curiosity and professional embarrassment. Intelligence officers worried not about ridicule so much as about a failure to notice a genuine capability. In closed hearings and internal reviews, the language centers on operational advantage and national security. Publicly, programs of this kind later drew scorn or dismissal. Privately, they were treated as another possible instrument in a very dangerous toolbox. And yet the documents alone do not tell the whole story. Alongside memos are accounts, recalled later by participants and journalists, describing the atmosphere in which these experiments began. Late-night briefings, nervous laughter that masked real tension, and an ever-present need to hedge conclusions with careful phrasing. One reporter later wrote how the early investigators at the Stanford Research Institute were taken seriously precisely because they insisted on protocols and repeatability, not hunches. That insistence helped bring otherwise skeptical sponsors to the table. If the phenomenon could be studied systematically, then it could possibly be controlled, or, at the very least, ruled out. Now let us place a soft human scene into the sterile files. Imagine a young analyst, alone with a thick folder and a kettle, reading about an experiment in which a subject in a closed room described a distant military facility with specific details, shapes of buildings, a water tower's placement, or the curve of a runway, that later matched satellite imagery. He rereads the report and feels the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He does not yet believe in psychic power. He believes in the fundamental rule that unexplained, repeatable phenomena demand attention. That is the logic that drove a rational agency to act. Not faith, but the practical application of precaution. There were practical questions too. Could remote perception be trained, standardized, and applied to real intelligence problems? Would the cost of false positives outweigh the value of a single real hit? Could analysts guard against suggestion, leakage of information, and the inevitable human biases that creep into any clandestine project. These were operational concerns that kept the program tethered to spreadsheets and economic realities rather than flights of fantasy. The history we can now read shows a sober, sometimes painfully bureaucratic effort to evaluate the claims on their merits. Before we close this chapter and gently glide into the next, I want you to hold a small, quiet image. A sealed envelope on a table, a blindfolded subject across from it, and a recorder clicking softly as a voice describes shapes and textures that no one in the room has seen. That image, intimate, simple, and just slightly uncanny, captures the germ of Stargate, an experiment made of ordinary objects conducted inside the extraordinary context of geopolitical fear. It is here, in the slow, cautious curiosity of those early days, that the program's story begins. In the next chapter, we will meet the people who sat in those chairs, the viewers whose descriptions sometimes startle the room into silence. We'll learn how a handful of names, voices, and sketches came to shape a program that would run for decades. Stay with me. There are small surprises ahead, and each one will be told gently so you can drift further into this history without haste. Chapter 2. The Men Who Could See Without Eyes. There is something quietly strange about the sound of a man describing a place he's never been. He speaks as if touching an object, soft nouns and patient verbs, yet his voice carries the weight of conviction that only long attention can give. In those early sessions in small rooms with plain walls and a tape recorder clicking at the corner, a handful of people would close their eyes and begin to describe landscapes, objects, and sensations that seemed to belong elsewhere. Tonight we move slowly into their presence. Let the room around you soften, and listen as we meet the first of those voices and learn how they were brought into a story that would span decades. The names are familiar to those who have followed this history. Ingo Swann, a small, intense man with an artist's eye and a tendency to describe colour and texture as if painting with words. Pat Price, whose sketches and confident, almost clinical descriptions jolted some analysts into a kind of nervous attention. These were not the romanticised mystics of popular lore. They arrived as individuals, artists, former policemen, everyday citizens whose testimonies were measured against controlled protocols. Their contributions matter because the investigators did not begin by accepting the extraordinary. They began with careful experiments, and then slowly, with a mixture of skepticism and wonder, they recorded the results. The fact that these sessions were taken seriously enough to attract funding and scrutiny tells us much about the atmosphere of those early years. When Ingo Swann first sat in laboratories at the Stanford Research Institute, the atmosphere was quiet and procedural. No dramatic lighting, no theatrical props, just chairs, clipboards, and people who wanted to see whether what seemed like a private sensory world could be made public and repeatable. Swann's descriptions were textured and particular. He spoke about shapes, materials, and even colours with the attention of an artist. What set him apart, according to those who recorded him, was his insistence on method. He suggested experiments that others had not considered, including sessions prompted by nothing more than a set of geographic coordinates. That proposal, remote viewing based on coordinates, was crucial. It moved the work away from vague impressions and toward a procedure that could be tested and evaluated. For the scientists and intelligence officers watching, that insistence on a testable method was what made the phenomenon worthy of further examination. Pat Price entered these rooms with a different reserve. Some remembered him as a quiet, focused man whose descriptions were economical, but often startlingly specific. In one well-known set of sessions, Price described what he called installations and structures, sketches that later drew attention when analysts compared them to what they believed to be relevant targets. Because he was less florid than Swann, his accounts carried a different kind of weight. They were terse and almost procedural, like a report from a field agent who trusted only facts. Whether Swann's painterly language or Price's concise rendering, the effect on observers was similar. Their hands paused over notepads, the room grew still, and those listening felt the gravity of something that might deserve a second look. It is important to imagine the small rituals that framed each session. The subject might be led into an unadorned room, asked to relax, and told only the barest procedural details. A researcher would hand the subject a set of coordinates, a sealed envelope, or a randomly selected target number. The subject would close their eyes and begin describing. First sensory impressions, then shapes, then perhaps the feeling of moving through a space, the scrape of gravel underfoot, the curve of a roof line, the metallic smell of machinery. Observers learned to listen for those sensory details because they were the parts of the report that could be compared directly to known information. Over time, the sessions were structured to minimize leakage, suggestion, or any possibility that the subject might have known the target by ordinary means. That insistence on controls is what allowed the program to continue being funded even when the results were inconsistent. There is also the quieter human story behind recruitment. Some of these participants came to the work after being noticed in unrelated tests or even by chance. An individual might be observed in a civilian psychological experiment, some oddly accurate guess, a sketch that matched a distant photograph, and then quietly approached by researchers who asked in a hushed voice whether they might take part in more formal sessions. The official record often describes the procedure. The informal recollections add texture. A knock on the door late in the afternoon, a closed notebook, and an invitation to sit in a different kind of room where the only requirement was to see and describe. Whether these recruitment stories are embellished by retelling or recorded faithfully, they form a believable layer beneath the public documents. Human beings notice something unusual in someone else, and the curiosity of scientists and spies led to an experiment. That human curiosity is a gentle, relentless force in science. Sometimes it pushes us to observation, sometimes to caution, but always toward the next question. As you listen, allow your imagination to soften into detail. Picture an early session, low light, the hum of an air conditioner, the soft rattle of a cassette recorder. The subject takes a breath and begins. There's an elevated walkway, concrete posts, water to the left. The listeners scribble. Later, a satellite path shows a facility with an elevated catwalk, concrete supports, and a river to the left. The match is not always precise, but when multiple elements line up, observers found it difficult to dismiss the observation entirely. It compelled them to design more rigorous conditions, to tighten controls, and to ask whether the mind, under certain conditions, could reliably access information beyond ordinary senses. The investigators themselves were a mix of backgrounds: physicists, psychologists, military analysts, and intelligence officers. It is illuminating to imagine the conversations that followed a promising session. A physicist might speak of the need for replicability. A psychologist would caution against cognitive biases. A military officer would ask, simply and resolutely, whether any of this could be operationalized. These conversations were slow and precise. They were not the fevered debates of popular legend, but measured, sometimes skeptical discussions about method and meaning. The presence of serious scientists in such meetings is one reason the project found its way into the classified budgets of intelligence agencies. These were not purely occult pursuits, but an attempt to place surprising observations under the light of systematic inquiry. One of the most striking aspects of these sessions was their capacity to unsettle normal expectations about testimony and evidence. When a subject described an installation with specific, verifiable details, those listening had to confront the possibility that anomalous perception might produce information that could not be explained away by ordinary channels, and yet the results were uneven. Some sessions yielded richly detailed descriptions that later matched known targets. Others produced images that seemed fanciful or wrong. That tension between striking hits and mundane misses became the engine of further study. Rather than accepting or rejecting the phenomenon wholesale, the program's architects learned to treat remote viewing like any other noisy instrument, calibrate the instrument, characterize its error rates, and explore whether training, protocol, or selection could improve signal-to-noise ratio. Over time, certain practices developed that made the sessions feel more like disciplined inquiry than seance. Detailed logs recorded every word. Sketches were dated, annotated, and sometimes compared by independent raters who had no knowledge of the target. The best accounts emphasize this procedural discipline because it is what allowed the work to persist within agencies that were otherwise suspicious of anything lacking empirical rigor. This is not to say that every safeguard worked perfectly. Human error and institutional pressures are always present, but the attempt at scientific structure is notable. It is the bridge between anecdote and data, and it is why the voices of Swann and Price continue to be studied and debated long after those early sessions ended. There are also the quieter anecdotal moments that linger like fingerprints in the memory of participants. An assistant might later recall the sudden, silent pause in the room when a subject began describing a detail no one in the room had been told. A low, rounded shape near the northeast corner, and then later, a confirmation on a photograph. Those moments are what people tell each other in private. Little spikes of surprise that made the work feel larger than theory alone. Whether these stories are wholly accurate in every retelling matters less than the fact that they shaped the emotional contour of the program. Surprise, curiosity, and a cautionary sense that one should not be too quick to dismiss what the mind might reveal under rare conditions. We must also attend to the skepticism that always accompanied the praise. Scientists and critics asked whether any reported matches could be explained by chance, subconscious knowledge, or even inadvertent cues from experimenters. The careful reader of this history will find a steady stream of methodological debates. Were controls tight enough? Were raters truly blind? Could statistical analyses disentangle hits from noise? Those questions are essential, and they make the story richer, not less compelling. The point is not to assert certainty, but to inhabit the full texture of inquiry, where wonder and critique are partners in the same room. As night settles in around these stories, let us bring the focus inward once more, toward the people who left those rooms different than they arrived. Some came away exhilarated, convinced they had access to something real. Others left with doubts, and a sense that the experience had taxed them emotionally and mentally. Before long, we will explore the human cost of participation, the vivid dreams, the dissociation, the quiet request for reassignment. But for now, let us hold the image of the room in the tape recorder, the subject's quiet voice, and the attentive scratch of pen on paper. These small things were where a strange problem met disciplined inquiry, and where the men and women who could see without eyes left the slow impression that something in their reports deserved more than casual dismissal. There is also a persistent, believable layer of rumour that lives alongside the formal accounts, the idea that some viewers were noticed in other contexts, during unrelated psychological testing, or even in civilian life, and quietly recruited. Some accounts suggest that when a viewer produced particularly precise or troubling descriptions, they were handled differently. Their sessions were compartmentalised, or they were quietly moved into other programs. These stories are not fully documented in the official record, but they are not implausible either. Intelligence work naturally compartmentalizes surprising information, and when an organization perceives a potential operational advantage or threat, it often reacts with the caution of secrecy. These whispers, part rumor, part plausible inference, add a human shadow to the methodical glow of published protocols. They remind us that the lived experience of these people was complex and often shaped by forces beyond the tape recorder. As we close this chapter and prepare to move forward, imagine again the recorder's soft click. Think of the voices, some spare and direct, others lush with sensory detail, speaking about places unseen. Let their cadence slow your breathing and steady your attention. In the next chapter, we'll follow the sessions into areas that made analysts uneasy, targets that were classified, forbidden, or simply beyond the normal scope of reconnaissance. We will explore what happened when the viewers described things they were never meant to see, and the ways those descriptions transformed curiosity into alarm. For now, hold the memory of the first experiments, the chairs, the envelopes, the careful notes, and know that the voices we met tonight were the people who made a secret program feel unexpectedly real. Chapter 3. Targets they were never meant to see. There is a slow, quiet thrill that moves through a room when someone describes a place no one in the room is allowed to speak about. It is a hush that is not exactly fear and not exactly awe. It is the sound of people realizing that something in their neat, ordered world has been touched by something wild and unplanned. In the early years of these experiments, the program tested ordinary targets, buildings, bridges, and markers that could be checked and counted. But as confidence in the methods grew, so did the curiosity of those who funded the work. The questions became sharper. Could the mind find what cameras did not? Could a remote viewer describe a place so secret that even maps did not show it? Tonight, as you settle deeper into the soft dark, we move into the moments when viewers began to look at places they were never meant to see. Imagine a small, windowless room. There is a table, a recorder, a pad of paper. The viewer sits across from an experimenter. The target is chosen and sealed away. It might be a number, a set of coordinates, or a sealed envelope with no hint of what lies inside. The viewer closes their eyes, breathes slowly, and begins to speak. At first, the words are small and tentative. Texture, light, a smell. Then shapes emerge, clear and simple. A building is described, a road, a piece of machinery. For the people listening, the first check is whether any ordinary channel could explain the detail. If not, the second check is whether the description can be matched later to known intelligence, a photograph, a map, or a satellite image. It is this slow, careful matching that turned curiosity into concern when the targets moved from the ordinary into the forbidden. Over time, viewers were asked to describe military bases, submarine docks, hidden compounds, and locations tied to hostages. These were places where ordinary spies would have used boots, cameras, and signals. The idea of using a human mind to reach across walls and fences felt, at once, like a fantasy and a practical gamble. When a viewer described a room that later matched the layout of a secure facility, the effect on analysts was visceral. It was not always perfect. Often, descriptions were vague or wrong, yet in enough cases fragments lined up. A tower here, an unusual fence there, the curve of a road that matched a satellite photo. Those fragments added up to a pattern that investigators could not simply ignore. One quiet kind of story that lived around the program was about how viewers sometimes named things that were not on any map. They would speak of buildings that did not appear in public records, or of structures that seemed to be buried or underground. In a small number of sessions, a viewer would become very focused, and then report details that felt to listeners oddly specific and out of place. The room would go quiet. Analysts would look at each other. One or two might frown and ask for the notes to be checked against imagery. Sometimes the details matched secret sites that had been spotted by other means, and sometimes they did not match anything anyone could find. Those moments are the ones that fed the rumour mill, the idea that viewers sometimes glimpse things not meant for human eyes. There is a human way to understand why these moments felt so dangerous. People who work with secrets know that secrecy is fragile. If information can move without wires or men with cameras, then the whole idea of hidden places shifts. For those inside the program, the fear was not only of enemies using such a method, it was also the fear that their own secrets could be exposed in ways they did not control. What does it mean to guard a place when the guard is not distance but direction? When you try to make the mind into a tool for knowing, you risk it finding things you wish to keep hidden. That tension turned many quiet experiments into serious debates. Some officers wanted to push harder to see if the method could be used as a new kind of scouting. Others asked whether they were opening a box they could not close. There are stories, both told in confidence and whispered afterward, of sessions that produced material so precise it forced immediate action. An analyst in the room might hear a description and, unable to wait, ask for a cross-check against satellite passes. Sometimes the description helped refine a search, pointing to a building that had otherwise been overlooked. These instances became the program's whispered successes, the kind that travel in private memos not on the front pages. They mattered because they suggested a real, limited use. If a viewer could narrow down a target or offer a detail that camera imagery missed, that detail could save time and sometimes lives. That idea kept funding alive even when many voices inside and outside the agency urged skepticism, yet the work also created moments of real alarm. There were sessions where viewers said the words that made people in the room change their tone. They would describe areas of a site that did not exist on any chart. They would name equipment or rooms that intelligence analysts had no record of. In one kind of account that circulated later, several viewers in separate sessions described similar features of a place that should not have been known to them. The researchers who heard these accounts would sometimes annotate them as anomalous or emotionally disturbing. The notation meant the description caused a reaction, not only because of what was said, but because the tone of the viewer suggested a deep, urgent feeling associated with the place. It is easy to imagine the room's stillness in those moments. Pens paused, heads bent. The hum of the air conditioner suddenly loud. Part of the danger lay in how these accounts pushed against legal and ethical boundaries. When a viewer described a private home or a place where people were living, the program's leaders had to ask whether they were overreaching. Could they use such methods on people who were not threats? What were the rules? Those questions were sometimes answered by internal limits, and sometimes by the quiet, uneasy choices of officers who felt the pressure of operational needs. The moral weight of looking at places with invisible eyes sat heavy on many who worked there. In private talks, some participants later said they felt uncomfortable with the idea that the mind could be directed toward a person or family as if they were a map. There were also the moments when viewers reported things that felt in a way like warnings. A viewer could describe a tense atmosphere in a place, or a feeling of being watched. The listeners in the room would later debate whether these descriptions were useful intelligence or the mind's projection, shaped by the viewer's emotions or the experimental setting. Yet when multiple viewers in different sessions report similar emotional notes about a site, the effect can be chilling. Analysts would sometimes note these patterns with careful clinical words. Consistent affect, they might write. But the human reaction was often a quiet, unsettled silence. Beyond the official rooms, rumours flowered. People talked about sessions that had been shut down, about envelopes stamped "Do Not Release," about notes slipping into black files. Stories claim that one viewer insisted he was seeing a structure not of Earth, that another described a network of tunnels that had not been drawn on any plan. These tales moved through the community like slow-burning candles. They warmed some and alarmed others. They were rarely found in formal reports, but they shaped conversations in hallways and over coffee. Whether these stories were fully accurate mattered less than their power to change how people thought about the work. They reminded everyone involved that the boundary between curiosity and fear is thin. Despite the strain, there were practical lessons. The program learned to select targets carefully, to design blind protocols, and to compare reports against independent sources. Analysts developed scoring systems to see which reports had elements that matched known facts, and which ones did not. Over time, these methods made the sessions look more like traditional intelligence work. Gather data, validate, and then act with caution. That careful, methodical approach is an important part of the story. It explains why the program lasted for years, not because it answered every question, but because it raised questions in a way that could be studied. As you drift now, imagine the slow unwrapping of a sealed envelope. Think of the hush in the room as a viewer speaks, the quiet scribble of notes, the small shock when a description matches a photo. Hold on to that feeling of small surprise. In the next chapter, we will follow an account that made even seasoned analysts uneasy. A session that produced a description so disturbing that it changed the tone of the work. We will sit with that story in a calm way, step by step, and let its weight settle into the quiet of our listening. Chapter 4: The Session That Terrified the Analysts. There are moments in history when a single room holds more weight than whole books. In one such room, on an ordinary weekday, the people who had seen a lot of strange things finally felt the air change. This chapter moves slowly through that day. I will tell it in detail, using quiet words and steady rhythm, so you can feel the tension without being rushed. Breathe in, breathe out, and let the scene unfold around you. The session began like many others. A small team had gathered, a lead researcher, an intelligence analyst, a recorder operator, and the viewer. The viewer had been tested before. He was known for accurate impressions. He had a calm voice and a way of focusing that made the room fall quiet. The team followed the same careful steps they always used. The target was sealed. The viewer was blind to any hint. The room was arranged so no one could give a clue by look or tone. Pens were placed on pads. The tape recorder clicked on. The viewer closed his eyes and took a long breath. At first, his descriptions were the usual mix of textures and small objects. He spoke about metal, cold walls, a smell like oil. He drew shapes with his hands as he spoke, as if tracing edges in the air. The lead researcher asked steady, quiet questions to keep the session focused. The viewer answered with small, exact words. Then his tone shifted. The calm cadence slowed. His breathing changed. He said something that made the lead researcher put a hand over his mouth, not to stop sound, but because his own voice had stopped for a moment. The viewer began to describe a place below ground. He used words that did not fit the usual targets. He described long corridors with a low hum, not the hum of air conditioning, but a deeper vibration, like a large engine turned on far away. He spoke of lights that pulsed faintly, and of panels that reflected no light at all. He drew a schematic in the air with his fingers, naming rooms and levels. Then he said a single line that everyone in the room would later write in their private notes. There are doors that face the wrong way. They lead to something that looks alive. Those words landed slow and heavy. The recorder kept clicking. The room was still. The analyst who handled the documents felt the skin on his arms tighten. He would later write he could feel his heartbeat in his throat. The lead researcher asked a careful question. the kind that keeps method and prevents panic. He asked for a description of shape and size. The viewer replied with details so specific they could be sketched. He named the number of levels. He gave a crude map of where each level connected. He described equipment the others didn't recognize. When the session ended, the team sat in the quiet for a long time. They compared notes and read the transcript. The lead researcher made a single line in the margin and then underlined it twice. The words were simple, emotionally disturbing. That label did not mean anything dramatic in a public report. It was a clinical phrase that let other program staff know to take care. But for those who were in the room, it was a code for something heavier. It meant that the viewer had reacted in a way the team had not seen before. He had described an affective tone, a feeling, in the place that made him tense and afraid. He had told them he felt watched. He had said that the place itself seemed to push back, as if something inside it noticed the mind that looked at it. Word moved slowly but firmly through the files. The session was flagged and moved into a special folder. Higher-level officers read the notes. They put the transcript in envelopes and stapled them shut. Some pages were marked for restricted handling. A few analysts who read the report later said they felt the air in their offices change. The line between curiosity and concern had shifted. People who had believed the work could be managed began to ask questions about safety. What if the mind could attract attention? What if the act of viewing left something behind? Those questions were whispered at first in halls and in brief private calls, then they rose to formal memos. In the weeks that followed, the program staff tried to reproduce the result under tight conditions. They ran more sessions with the same viewer and with others. Sometimes the scene was described again. In a few trials, different viewers reported similar elements: the low hum, the wrong-facing doors, the sense of being watched. The repetition gave weight to the reports. It stopped being the story of a single frightened person and became a pattern noticed by more than one observer. The pattern grew even when the descriptions came in fragments. The fragments fit together like pieces of a slow puzzle. The team began to see that something in those sessions was not just odd. It was consistent across different minds. Those repeated reports changed how decision-makers saw the program. No longer could they treat remote viewing simply as an odd tool to be tested and set aside. They had to consider whether the work carried risk. Senior staff debated whether to continue the sessions to broaden study or to stop altogether. Some argued for closure, fearing an unknown consequence. Others argued for cautionary continuation, believing that careful study could reduce risk. The debate was tense. It was not only about reliability of information, but about the safety of participants and the integrity of classified spaces. In private notes that later reached a few trusted readers, someone scribbled a sentence that would be retold in quiet conversations. This cannot be coincidence. It was not an official finding. It was a human reaction to seeing similar strange details come up more than once. Those words shared in private made certain managers uneasy. If multiple independent minds reported similar anomalies to secret places, the implication was larger than a single hit. It suggested either an unknown link between human perception and hidden spaces, or a source of error not yet understood. The uncertainty pushed the program into a state of anxious double-checking. The human toll of that session showed in small ways. The viewer who had first described the underground place began to suffer from vivid dreams. He called in and said he slept badly for nights after the session. He told staff that he felt watched at home, that shadows seemed too heavy in the corners of his rooms. He asked for time away and, in some accounts, for counselling. Other viewers reported similar after effects, dreams that repeated fragments of the session, small episodes of dissociation, a sense they could hear a distant vibration when nothing was running. These reports worried the medical officers attached to the program. They considered whether there was a psychological cost to sustained deep focus work. They also wondered if any physical effect was possible. The notes in the medical folders were careful and clinical, but they recorded real distress among participants. The program changed some rules. They limited session lengths. They added debriefing procedures. They included mental health checks before and after certain trials. They tightened informed consent language, though that language was not the kind that appears in public. It lived inside internal forms and guarded pages. The idea was to protect participants and to gather data on after effects. Still, the memory of that terrifying session remained like a quiet scar on the program's record. People who had read the transcript in full later said it influenced their decisions on funding, on participant selection, and on how much secrecy to wrap around the work. Rumours grew around the event. Coffee room talk exaggerated details until they read like campfire stories. Some claim the viewer had described a structure not from Earth. Others said the viewer had seen faces in the walls. The formal record didn't support those wild claims. But the tone from the original transcript did leave room for slower, more careful speculation. What the record did show was a clear shift in mood, from curiosity with caution to real concern. The rumour that it went too far found fertile ground because people prefer a sharp story to a slow, messy one. Yet the slow version is the truer thing. A cautious team, an unusual report, repeated elements, medical notes, and a long debate about risk and reward. We must also look at the way the program's managers dealt with the file. Rather than publish or destroy, they did a third thing. They buried it somewhere safer, not in public, not in the central files. It was moved into a compartment that required special clearance. Some officers thought this move was prudent. Others thought it was the start of hiding knowledge rather than examining it. That decision fed a later narrative, that the program did not simply fail or succeed. It became something to manage like a delicate instrument. People began to whisper that certain sessions were marked "Do not release" or "For senior review only." Those marks, benign on their face, added to the sense that the work had moved past ordinary study. There were also analytic consequences. The team tried new scoring methods to handle inconsistent results. They looked separately at descriptive detail, emotional tone, and repeatability. They experimented with paired evaluation. One rater would look only at sketches, another only at words. They asked whether the emotional content could be coded and used as a signal rather than noise. These changes came slowly, in long meetings and quieter memos. The terrifying session was at the center of those conversations because it raised questions no training protocol could easily answer. As we sit with this story, feel the slow heaviness of the room where it happened. Picture the tape recorder, the sketch on the pad, the underlined note. Hear the soft voices that tried to keep method even as fear entered the doorway. This is not a tale of sudden heroics or neat solutions. It is the long human response to an unexpected pattern that forced careful minds to change how they ran the experiment. It pressed them to care for the people involved and to think soberly about the unseen costs of looking. Before we leave this chapter, I will give you a quiet image to hold. Imagine a file closed and slid into a drawer, labelled for senior eyes only. Imagine that drawer standing behind a thick door. Imagine the hum of the building, the slow tick of a clock, and the weight of choices made in that hush. Later chapters will trace how that file shaped the program's history. We'll see how fear and curiosity tangled, how some programs were tightened while others were put into small private streams. We'll meet people who read those pages years later and could not shake the image of doors that faced the wrong way. Chapter 5. The Ones Who Didn't Walk Away the Same. There is a quiet cost to seeing too much, especially when what is seen cannot be fully explained or shared. In this chapter, we slow down and look closely at the people behind the data, the viewers, the analysts, and even the observers, and how this work slowly changed some of them in ways that never appeared in official summaries. This is not a dramatic story told in loud moments. It is a long, gentle unfolding of small changes, personal struggles, and silent choices that stayed hidden behind closed doors. At first, many of the viewers felt curious and even proud to take part. They were told their role mattered. They were treated with respect and care. The sessions were structured, calm, and often ended with quiet reassurance. But as time went on, some viewers began to notice changes in themselves that felt difficult to name. These changes did not happen all at once. They appeared slowly, like mist forming over water, easy to ignore at first. One viewer described that after long sessions the world felt slightly unreal, as if colours were dulled or sounds arrived a second late. Another said that everyday places began to feel layered, as though there was more than one version of a room at the same time. These were not frightening experiences at first. They were subtle and strange, and many viewers did not report them right away. They thought it was stress, or imagination, or simple fatigue. Dreams were often the first thing to change. Several viewers spoke about dreams that were unusually vivid and detailed. These dreams did not feel symbolic or distant. They felt clear, sharp and close, like memories rather than dreams. Some dreams repeated the same places again and again: corridors, rooms, stairways, places that felt connected to viewing sessions, even when the viewer did not consciously recognize them. A few viewers said they woke up tired, as if they had been working all night instead of resting. As the program continued, some viewers began to report a strange overlap between sessions and waking life. A shape described during a session might appear later in a dream. A feeling sensed during a viewing might return while driving or sitting quietly at home. These overlaps made it hard for some participants to separate work from rest. The mind did not seem to fully close after sessions. For people trained to focus deeply, turning that focus off proved difficult. Analysts and support staff noticed changes too. Viewers who had once been calm and confident sometimes grew withdrawn. Others became anxious before sessions, even when they could not explain why. A few asked to shorten their sessions or skip certain targets. These requests were handled quietly and without punishment, but they were noted. Over time, those notes formed a pattern that could not be ignored. There were also reports of dissociation, moments when viewers felt detached from their bodies or surroundings. These moments were usually brief but unsettling. One viewer described feeling as if he was slightly behind himself, watching his own actions from a distance. Another said that after intense sessions, it took effort to feel fully present in normal conversations. These effects raised concerns among medical and psychological staff connected to the program. The program responded in careful ways. They added longer breaks between sessions. They encouraged grounding exercises, simple actions meant to bring attention back to the body and the present moment. Viewers were reminded to eat, rest, and avoid isolation. Mental health check-ins became more regular, though still private. The goal was not only to protect participants, but also to keep the work stable and controlled. Still, not everyone recovered easily. Some viewers chose to step away. They did not make formal complaints. They simply said they could not continue. One viewer reportedly told a supervisor in a calm but firm voice, "Something followed me back." He did not explain further. He did not need to. His request to leave the program was granted, and his name stopped appearing on session schedules. There were also stories of shared experiences that unsettled even experienced staff. In a few cases, different viewers described similar dreams after separate sessions, without speaking to each other. These dreams involved the same places, the same feelings, and sometimes the same sequence of events. While this was never confirmed in official findings, it was discussed quietly among those who noticed the pattern. Whether coincidence or something else, it added to the sense that the work affected people in ways that reached beyond the session room. Analysts were not immune either. Reading transcript after transcript of intense descriptions began to take a toll. Some analysts reported feeling uneasy when reviewing certain files late at night. Others said they felt watched while reading, even though they knew logically that no one was there. These reactions were rarely spoken aloud. In intelligence culture, emotional reactions are often kept private, but they existed and they mattered. The emotional weight of the work also came from responsibility. Analysts had to decide which information to pass along and which to hold back. If a viewer described something disturbing, should it be shared with command? Should it be filtered? Should it be ignored? These choices carried moral weight. They were not just about accuracy, but about impact. Some analysts worried that passing along certain impressions could cause unnecessary fear or lead to actions based on uncertain data. Over time, a quiet divide formed within the program. Some staff believed the personal costs were too high and the results too uncertain. Others believed the costs were the price of touching something important and real. This divide did not explode into conflict. It settled into quiet disagreement, expressed in careful wording and private conversations. The program also began to notice that not all viewers reacted the same way. Some seemed resilient. They could enter deep focus and return without difficulty. Others struggled more. This led to informal classification. Viewers who could handle intense targets and those who could not. Assignments were adjusted accordingly. This practice was never announced publicly, but it shaped how the program ran in its later years. What is most striking looking back is how little of this human cost appeared in official summaries. Reports focused on results, methods, and conclusions. The inner lives of participants remained mostly invisible, yet those inner lives shaped the program's direction just as much as any data point. The fear was not only about what viewers saw, it was about what the seeing did to them. As you rest with this chapter, imagine the quiet moments after a session ends. The viewer leaves the room and steps into daylight. Cars pass, life continues, yet something inside has shifted slightly, like a compass needle nudged off center. That shift might fade or it might remain, changing how the world feels forever. In the next chapter, we will step back and ask a question that lingered over every meeting and every budget decision. Did this actually work? We will move calmly through successes, near misses, and the reasons this program survived far longer than most people realize. Chapter 6. Did Stargate actually work? This question sat quietly at the center of every meeting, every budget request, and every late-night review of transcripts. It was never asked loudly. It did not need to be. Everyone involved felt it sitting in the room, heavy and patient. Did this actually work? Not in a dramatic, movie-like way, but in the slow, practical sense that intelligence work demands. Did it give useful information often enough to matter? And if it did not work at all, why did it continue for so long? To understand this, we must slow down and look at how intelligence programs usually behave. Most secret programs do not last very long. If something produces no value, it is cut quickly and quietly. Funding moves elsewhere. Staff are reassigned. Files are closed. Yet this program did not fade after a year or two. It changed names. It shifted offices. It moved under different departments. It survived leadership changes, political pressure, and public doubt. It stayed alive for more than 20 years. That fact alone tells us something important. Inside the program, success was never defined as perfect accuracy. No one expected a viewer to describe every detail of a target correctly. Instead, success was measured in small gains, a useful shape, a correct layout, a detail that matched later images. Sometimes the value was not what was seen, but how it guided attention. A viewer might describe a structure near water, prompting analysts to look again at coastal images. Another might mention unusual movement, leading to closer inspection of a site at a specific time. These were not dramatic victories, they were quiet assists. There were cases where viewers described locations that later turned out to be real and relevant. In some instances, viewers identified features of military sites that were confirmed only after new imagery became available. In other cases, they provided impressions that helped narrow search areas. These moments were carefully recorded, not celebrated. Analysts treated them the same way they treated any source, cautiously with verification. Still, when these moments happened more than once, they added weight to the program's value. It is also important to understand how results were reported. The program did not present its strongest successes on their own. Instead, results were averaged. Strong sessions were placed alongside weak ones. Clear hits were grouped with vague or wrong impressions. This made overall success rates look modest. To an outsider reading a summary, the program might seem unreliable, but some insiders later suggested that this averaging was deliberate. By blending strong results with noise, the program appeared less threatening and less controversial. It remained easier to defend quietly and easier to protect from sudden shutdown. There were also claims that certain viewers performed far better than others. These individuals were said to produce clearer, more consistent descriptions. Rather than highlight them publicly within the program, they were sometimes separated into smaller groups. Their sessions were handled with tighter control and less sharing. This practice, known as compartmentalization, is common in intelligence work. It limits who sees what and reduces risk. If this happened, it would explain why some of the most compelling results never appeared in broad program reviews. Another reason the program lasted was flexibility. When critics questioned its value, the program adjusted its goals. Instead of claiming to replace traditional intelligence, it framed itself as a support tool. Instead of promising certainty, it offered possibility. This made it easier to justify continued funding. A tool that sometimes helps is harder to cut than one that promises miracles and fails. There were also moments when decision-makers faced uncomfortable choices. Imagine an analyst holding two pieces of information: a remote viewing report that suggested something important and a lack of confirmation from other sources. Do you act on it? Do you wait? In some cases, the viewing report was enough to justify closer surveillance or additional data collection. When later information confirmed the concern, the viewing session gained quiet credibility. When nothing was found, the report was archived and forgotten. This uneven memory shaped how the program was judged. Critics inside the system were never silenced completely. Some analysts argued that successes could be explained by chance or vague language. Others pointed out that human pattern seeking could inflate the meaning of partial matches. These critiques were serious and ongoing. They led to improved scoring methods and stricter controls, but they did not erase the successes that could not be easily explained. Instead, they coexisted with them, creating a program that lived in tension between belief and doubt. One of the strongest signs that the program worked, at least sometimes, was how carefully its strongest results were handled. They were not shared widely. They were not used for public defense. They were quietly passed to people who needed to know. In intelligence culture, this is often how useful but sensitive tools are treated. Loud tools attract attention. Quiet tools survive. The program's survival also depended on timing. During the Cold War and its aftermath, fear created room for unusual ideas. When leaders believed an enemy might be exploring similar methods, ignoring the possibility felt risky. Even a small chance of advantage was enough to justify continued study. This fear did not vanish overnight. It faded slowly, allowing the program to continue in reduced but persistent forms. As you rest with this chapter, imagine a long table covered with files. Some are thick, others thin. A few have marks that suggest they were read often. The people around the table do not argue loudly. They speak in measured tones. They're not asking whether the program proves anything about reality. They're asking a simpler question. Does this help us even a little? And for many years, the answer was just enough to keep the lights on. In the next chapter, we will explore what happened when the program was officially shut down and why many believe it never truly ended at all. Chapter 7: The Official Shutdown That Wasn't. There is a quiet irony in intelligence work. Sometimes programs are officially ended not because they have failed entirely, but because their existence becomes inconvenient. In the case of Project Stargate, the official closure came in 1995, a year that marked the program as having lack of operational value. On paper, it was terminated. Publicly, the narrative was simple. Decades of research, some curious results, but nothing that justified continued funding. And yet, like a shadow slipping between walls, the reality was far more complex. To understand this, it helps to step back and picture how large organizations handle secret projects. Programs with sensitive material rarely vanish overnight. Budgets may be reduced, offices reassigned, and documents classified more deeply. Some parts of a program are formally shut down, while other portions are quietly absorbed into new initiatives, often under new names and new divisions. In intelligence circles, there is a saying, "You don't kill it, you bury it." That was the path Stargate appeared to take. Even before the formal shutdown, the program had undergone multiple transformations. Names changed from Grill Flame to Center Lane, and then to Sunstreak. These shifts were more than cosmetic. They were structural, affecting reporting lines, oversight, and how findings were shared. Each iteration of the program allowed leadership to refine methods, manage personnel, and control access to sensitive results. By the time the official 1995 closure occurred, Stargate was no longer a single, centralized entity. Its work had fragmented into smaller, specialized streams, some of which remained active in ways that were never publicly acknowledged. Part of the reason for this quiet continuation was the knowledge already gained. Even if the results seemed inconsistent or modest, the methods and protocols developed over decades had value. Analysts understood how to run remote viewing sessions, how to score results, and how to select participants. They also understood the psychological effects of such work. This knowledge did not vanish when the program was terminated. It moved behind controlled access, accessible to certain contractors, departments, and private research streams. For those inside, the shutdown was a formality. For those outside, it appeared as final closure. There are accounts, some more credible than others, of small groups being retained to continue experiments undercover. Sessions may have continued under different banners, framed as human performance studies or cognitive research. Observers who later discussed the period suggested that only a fraction of data ever surfaced in official reports. The rest remained locked in private archives, referenced occasionally but never publicly acknowledged. It is possible that some high-accuracy viewers continued to be tested, their results quietly guiding intelligence decisions, even as the broader program was said to have ended. The official narrative also served another purpose: public relations and bureaucratic clarity. by declaring the program terminated, leadership created a clear break in records for the public and for oversight committees. The reality, however, was more subtle. Termination allowed a transition from government-funded direct operations to research managed by contractors, academic partnerships, or privatized streams. In intelligence work, this is a common approach to maintain continuity while reducing direct exposure. In essence, the program's methodology and select participants lived on even as the name Stargate disappeared from public documents. For participants who remained, this transition was confusing. Some were reassigned quietly, with little explanation. Others noticed that the rules had shifted. The methods remained, but the oversight was different. They were asked to submit reports to new supervisors, to work under new project titles, and to adhere to protocols that had subtle but important changes. The science and practice of remote viewing persisted, even as the organisation of the work was obscured. For those deeply involved, the work never truly stopped. An important element of this period is how information was compartmentalised. Not all analysts, not all viewers, and not all supervisors knew the full scope of continuing work. Sensitive sessions might be scheduled under obscure names or different office codes. Some data that would have been part of a larger body of research in earlier years was now treated as independent pockets of intelligence. This compartmentalization added security, but also reinforced the sense of mystery around the program. People who left or retired often never learned what had continued in the shadows. The quiet persistence of the work also speaks to the perceived utility of the program. Even if remote viewing could not replace satellites or human operatives, it could provide occasional guidance. Certain successes were still considered valuable enough to preserve, even if reporting was restricted. Funding may have shifted from black budgets to smaller research streams, but the methods, the trained participants, and the knowledge they produced continued to exist. This underscores an important lesson. Termination on paper does not necessarily equate to the end of activity, especially in classified work. The rumours that circulated during this transition were telling. Staff whispered that select viewers were still being consulted for critical missions. Some claimed that remote viewing had been merged with emerging technologies, blending human intuition with computational analysis. Others suggested that the best results were sent to specialized intelligence divisions that preferred not to advertise their tools. While these accounts are difficult to verify, they align with what is known about how intelligence agencies handle valuable but unconventional programs. Continuity and secrecy often outweigh public disclosure. During this period, the psychological impact on participants remained a concern. Some were wary of continued involvement, knowing that the work could strain the mind and spirit. Others embraced the chance to refine their abilities in a controlled environment. Support systems were informal, but the awareness of personal risk was always present. These ongoing concerns reinforce a recurring theme in Stargate's history. The program was as much about managing people and perception as it was about the targets themselves. As you rest with this chapter, picture the program as a quiet river beneath the surface. On top, the public sees the riverbanks, maybe a small ripple here and there, and the declaration that the river has ended. Beneath, however, the water continues to flow, winding through hidden channels, nourishing areas unseen, connecting points that the casual observer cannot notice. This is the reality of Stargate after its official shutdown. Visible closure, hidden continuity, and subtle movement of knowledge and capability behind the scenes. In the next chapter, we will explore how echoes of this work persisted into modern intelligence and black projects, tracing the invisible threads from past experiments to present-day practices, and considering what this continuity means for how human perception and observation are still valued in ways most people will never see. Chapter 8. echoes in modern intelligence and black projects. There is a soft, slow way that old work moves into new hands. It does not leap like a bright idea. It seeps like water through stone, finding small cracks and then opening them wider. If you follow the faint lines left by Project Stargate, you find traces in places that sound, at first, ordinary. In research grants, in quiet meetings, in contractors who do work no one loudly claims. Tonight we will walk gently through those slow connections. We will look at how methods, stories, and people from those early days could have shaped later efforts. We will do this without hurry, so you can let each idea settle like a small bell in a quiet room. When a program runs for a long time, it builds more than reports. It builds people with a way of thinking, tools for testing, checklists for keeping experiments honest, and a habit of asking certain questions. Even when the name changes, the habit stays. Those who ran early remote viewing sessions learned how to set up blind targets, how to score impressions, and how to protect against suggestion. They learn about the emotional cost to participants and how to care for them. They learn to hide results carefully when needed and to pass them to a small circle when the results mattered. Those know-how pieces are useful in many fields. They do not vanish when budgets change. They travel in the heads of people who move from one job to another, or who retire and then consult for private firms. Imagine a room years later where someone in a private lab says, in a quiet voice, "We already have a protocol for blind targeting. The line is small, but it carries a lot. Technology also opened new doors. As satellite imagery and data analysis grew more powerful, so did the ability to look at subtle patterns. That did not replace the human mind. It changed the way data and human insight could be mixed. Picture a scene where analysts overlay a viewer's sketch with a new high-resolution image and then run a simple pattern match. The tools are modern, but the idea is similar. Combine one source with another to point attention. In some places, that mix creates a useful step. In others, it creates new questions about what is causal and what is coincidental. The quiet thought that guided earlier work remains. If the mind sometimes points to a useful place, then using modern tools to check those pointers seems smart and small. It is the kind of slow logic that keeps methods alive. Contractors and private labs often move in the spaces government leaves empty. When public funding slows, private money can take up pieces of work that look promising or strange. People with experience in remote viewing and related methods sometimes move into private research, offering their protocols in a more flexible setting. In those quieter places, experiments can continue without the same oversight, and the best results can be used for clients who want a different kind of answer. Whether this happened often or rarely, the pattern is familiar. Skills learned under one roof can be used under another. Those who remember the old rooms and the soft click of recorders sometimes find themselves in new offices where the tools look like modern research, but the questions are close to the old ones. Can human perception be guided to find what machines miss? There is also the subtle human pattern of curiosity. When a field is declared closed, a few people keep looking. They read the old files, they test lingering ideas in small, careful ways, and they argue in private about what should be tried next. Over the years, some of these private efforts have linked to work that on the surface looks modern, studies of human attention, programs to measure intuitive decision-making, and projects that explore human performance in stressful or unusual conditions. Many of these projects have legitimate practical aims, improving training, reducing error, or helping people operate better in complex systems. Yet the lineage to earlier remote viewing work can be found in the questions asked and in the careful ways experiments are built. In some quieter circles, people began to talk about blending human intuition with machine tools. The idea is not science fiction in the way people think of it. It is a simple concept. Use human insight to flag things for machines, and use machines to test and refine those flags. Imagine a modern analyst who feeds a viewer's sketch into a database and asks an algorithm to find similar patterns across millions of images. The algorithm can bring back likely matches, and human judgment can then decide which ones matter. This kind of collaboration changes how results are handled. The human mind suggests, the machine searches, and together they move faster than either could alone. The edges of this work are quiet and careful, and the ethics and limits are part of the same conversations we heard years ago. There are stories that float in the back rooms of intelligence and contracting firms. Some are small and plausible. A contractor with government experience is hired to run a workshop on human perception for a team working on unusual threat detection. Others are bigger, the sort of tale that causes a slow chill. Whispered claims that certain private firms have tried to use remote viewing style methods to help guide searches for missing objects, lost people, or hidden caches. These stories often resist confirmation. They live in anecdote, in emails forwarded among people who like to keep each other informed. Because they are quiet, they hold an emotional weight that formal reports do not. They also create a pattern. When official doors close, other doors open, and methods find new life in new hands. Modern military interest in human factors also kept the idea alive. Military planners today talk about cognitive warfare and human performance more openly than before. They ask how information affects belief and behavior, how attention can be shaped, and how people make decisions when data is messy. Some projects focus on psychological resilience, others on decision support. If human perception sometimes provides useful, even fleeting information, then the military interest in the human side makes sense. It is not always about claiming psychic power. It is often about exploring how subtle cues, training and focus can help people notice what others miss. Those small edges of human performance are valuable in many operational settings. There are also stories that are darker and more rumour-like. People talk about contractors quietly testing unusual methods for anomalous threat detection, and about private labs receiving small pots of funding to try old protocols with new devices. The claims are often vague. They sound like this. They ran sessions with trained viewers and then cross-check their reports with new sensor data. Whether this happens and how much it mattered are questions that rarely get answered in public. But the shape of the story is familiar. Old methods combined with new tools, tried quietly by people who believe the past still holds useful lessons. One of the most unsettling ideas people whisper about is that the same method that can find hidden places might be used to look at people or to guide influence. That is a heavy thought, and it raises moral questions. If human perception can be directed, then what limits should exist? Who decides where the line is drawn? In quiet debates inside agencies and labs, these questions have been raised many times, and they shape how research gets done. Many people working in the field push hard for strict rules, informed consent, clear limits on targets, and support for participants. Those rules exist because people remember the cost of seeing too much, and they want to avoid repeating it. Listening to the echoes of old work also means noting what has changed. Science is more public, methods are more transparent, and ethics conversations are louder now than decades ago. New research is subject to peer review and public scrutiny in ways that earlier secret programs were not. That makes modern experiments slower and more thorough. It also means that private continuations face more pressure to justify their methods and funding. The old days of quiet files have less power than before. But the human habit of curiosity still finds channels, and those channels can be very quiet. As you rest with these thoughts, imagine a long hallway with many doors. Some doors are labelled with familiar names: labs, universities, military offices. Other doors are small and unlabelled, opened in the night by people who remember old protocols. Behind some doors there is routine work on human cognition. Behind others, a few people test odd ideas with modern tools. The hallway is calm. Footsteps move slowly. The light is low. What matters is not a single dramatic claim of proof, but the fact that the same questions keep returning. What can the human mind do? How can we measure it? And what are the costs and benefits of trying? In the next chapter, we will listen to the deepest fear that once gripped those who read the files. Not that the work was false, but that it might be true. We will sit quietly with the idea that consciousness could reach beyond walls, and that this possibility changed how people thought about secrecy and power. Stay with me. There is more to come, and each chapter will move gently, like fingers turning the pages of a slow, careful book. Chapter 9. What the CIA feared most. There is a small, cold place inside any secret system where fear is not loud and bright, but slow and steady. It is not the kind of fear that comes from a known enemy at the gate. It is the kind of fear that comes from a quiet idea that keeps returning at night like a draft under a door. For the people who read the files and sat in the meetings, that fear had a shape. Not that the work was false, but that it might be true. That possibility, gentle, simple, and enormous, was what haunted the program. Tonight we sit with that fear and move through it slowly, feeling each part so we understand why it changed how people thought about secrecy, power, and privacy. Imagine a thick metal door that is supposed to keep things in and keep others out. People trust that door because it is a thing you can see and bolt shut. Now imagine the thought that some minds might be able to know what lies beyond that door without climbing the stairs or picking the lock. The idea is not a scream, it is a slow shiver. It suggests that distance and walls and codes may not be the only limits to knowing. If even a few people could reach past barriers with their minds, then many of the rules that held a system together feel less certain. That is what troubled high-level officers. The loss of the idea that secrecy is absolute. The fear had many small parts. First was the practical worry. If an adversary could find hidden sites without sending men or machines, then planning and vulnerability change in a single day. A well-hidden depot, a secret lab, or a backup site might no longer be safe. Analysts who spent decades perfecting camouflage, routing, and deniability felt exposed in a way that no spy photograph had ever shown. They had made plans on the assumption that distance, darkness, and deception were secure. The notion that perception might not care about fences or code word felt like a hole in that plan. Second was the strategic worry. Power rests on secrets. If powerful groups could be seen through, then the balance of power shifts. Intelligence services worried not only that enemies might use similar methods, but that their own hidden plans could be touched by minds they didn't control. The idea is simple and heavy. Every secret that matters becomes less safe. If a mind could find a hidden weapon, it could also find plans, names, and places. The sheet of rules that holds a state or an institution together would feel thinner. Third was the social worry. Privacy itself looked different when you imagine minds reaching beyond doors. People trusted that private spaces were private because walls meant privacy. If consciousness can cross walls, what does privacy mean anymore? Those who handled sensitive files, who guarded lists and identities, felt a different kind of risk. They were not only thinking about threats to the state, they were thinking about threats to ordinary people. The thought that a mind might focus on private houses or private lives raised moral questions that the program tried to answer with rules and limits. But fears do not always stay quiet when rules change. Fourth was the ethical worry. How far can you look? If you invent a method that might reach anywhere, what rules will stop it from slipping into harm? People inside the program debated the limits. They worried about using the method against civilians, about directing mines toward places where people slept and ate. The moral question was not abstract. It was daily and practical. Who decides what is off limits? Who watches the watchers? Those questions made many inside the project uneasy. They were trained to follow orders, but they also knew that some lines should not be crossed. These small fears gathered into a larger anxiety that cut across budgets and staff memos. Some managers worried that the mere suggestion of a real ability would cause public panic if it leaked. Others feared ridicule that would strip resources away from other, more conventional programs. The balance was tricky. Treat the thing openly and risk collapse under ridicule, or treat it secretly and risk it growing into something you could not fully control. That balancing act is why the program changed names, moved offices, and buried some files deeper than others. Managing fear became part of management itself. There were stories that made the fear feel real in human terms. An analyst would tell a quiet tale of a time a viewer described the layout of a safe house before any satellite had noticed it. A supervisor would recall the feeling of reading a report that matched a secret photo the agency later obtained. There were accounts of a retired officer who, late in life, told a friend he had once watched a session and left the building feeling as if he'd been made naked. He could not explain why, he said, only that the experience had changed how he locked his files and how he slept at night. These stories circulated in halls and over dinner tables. They were small, personal, and powerful. They did not prove anything to the world, but they proved something to the people who heard them. The idea of remote knowing made the rooms where they worked feel different. In some circles, the fear turned to action. If the mind could cross walls, what defences could be built? Some officers asked for experiments and countermeasures. Could training confuse a viewer? Could false targets be used to mislead a mind? Could mental shielding be taught, like taught how to close a mental door? The questions were practical and strange at once. Teams of psychologists, intelligence officers, and trainers explored ways to protect information. They tried misdirection, layers of decoys, and strict need-to-know limits. Sometimes the answers were small and pragmatic. Reduce the number of people who know the full layout. Break plans into pieces so no single mind can see the whole. Other times the answers were more experimental, training people to focus on neutral images after sensitive meetings, providing mental grounding exercises to those who handled secret plans. The methods were imperfect, but they showed a clear logic. If perception might reach, then protect the things that matter in new ways. There were also quieter moves. Some officers insisted that sensitive planning happen in places that were more controlled, with fewer people present. They urged that documents be held to a minimum and that paper trails be reduced. Some managers changed meeting routines, notes destroyed after reading, devices removed from rooms, and time limits on discussions. These changes were not dramatic at first. They were small shifts in habit, but habit matters. Over time, the way work was done changed in subtle ways because of a slow, persistent fear. Beyond practical countermeasures, there was a deeper worry. The social and political consequences if the idea of non-local perception was accepted publicly. Imagine a world where anyone could claim a mind that saw anywhere. Who would be believed? Who would be accused? How would courts handle testimony that came from strange perception, rather than eyewitness or physical evidence? The thought stretched into civil life and law. It was not only an intelligence problem, it was a question about how societies manage trust, evidence, and harm. Inside the program, many people wrestled with these questions. Some believed a truth should be studied openly so society could choose how to cope. Others thought secrecy was safer, that the public was not ready for the knowledge, and that a slow, careful approach was best. These debates were not public. They were quiet and intense and lasted for years. The choices they made shaped how the work continued and how it was hidden. Now, placed beside these fears a softer, human layer, rumours and private notes that filled the spaces between formal memos. People talked of a phrase sometimes whispered in closed rooms: "No secret is safe." It was not a report. It was not an official finding. It was a mood. It grew from sessions that seemed to point to places not on maps, and from dreams some viewers reported after deep work. These whispers scared some and intrigued others. They also fed the need for rules, for checks, and for care. There were also stories of more concrete measures taken in secret. A contractor who said his team was asked to design a room for sensitive meetings with special soundproofing and layouts, meant to reduce suggestion and stray attention. A training officer who wrote that viewers should not be exposed to photographs before sessions. A psychologist who insisted on mental health checks. These acts were small and sensible. They were not dramatic proof, but they were evidence of seriousness. People were trying to respond to fear with practical steps, to take care of both information and the minds that handled it. As the program moved forward, the fear never truly left. It shifted shape. Sometimes it was professional worry about operational risk. Sometimes it was a personal fear about privacy and sleep. Sometimes it was a philosophical concern about what freedom and secrecy mean in a world where distance may not be the same boundary it once was. The people involved learned to live with that fear, to make plans that assumed imperfection, and to build systems that treated perception as one of many signals to be weighed, not the only one that mattered. Before we close this chapter, hold a clear image in your mind. Picture a small office late at night. A man sits alone under soft light, a folder open on his desk. He reads a line that mentions a place no one was meant to know. He closes the folder, turns off the lamp, and walks out into the quiet parking lot. He pauses, listening to the night, feeling the strange new shape of the world in his chest. That pause, small and private, is what the fear looked like for many. A gentle, lasting shift that changed how they held secrets and how they thought about being safe. In the next chapter, we will sit with a final, open-ended question that followed these programs. What else did they see, and who chooses what we're allowed to know? We'll carry the same soft attention and the same calm pace as we ask what remains hidden and what we might still learn. Chapter 10. The question that still has no answer. There is a soft kind of silence that sits over questions with no easy ends. It is not empty, it holds weight. It holds files and folded papers, the memory of voices in a room, and the slow, careful choices made behind closed doors. Tonight, we sit in that silence and ask, what else did they see, and who decides what we're allowed to know? We will move slowly through this, breathe between ideas, and let each thought settle. This is a slow, gentle search for what might still be hidden, and for the people who hold the keys. Start with a clear image: a contractor's office late at night, a single lamp, a man with a cup of tea. He opens a metal box and pulls out thick bundles of paper, some stamped with the words "Eyes Only." He reads slowly, not because he is trying to prove anything, but because meaning in those pages can change the shape of a life. That image is not about drama. It is about ordinary people who handle fragile things. Those files are where many answers and many questions live. Some things are known in plain ways. We know that the program ran for many years. We know names of a few people who took part. We know that some papers were later released. But knowing a list of facts is not the same as knowing the whole story. Secrets can be layered, pages can be redacted, or whole folders kept in separate rooms with special locks. The choice about what to release is not always about truth alone. It is about risk, politics, and what leaders think the public should see. That is why asking what else did they see is really asking, what did they protect, and why did they protect it? There are many small human accounts that point to more than the short public record. A retired staffer might say, in a quiet voice, that he remembers a session that was never mentioned in any later summary. He thinks about it often. He keeps a simple note in a drawer. An analyst may recall a string of sketches that were moved to a higher file because the description matched something a satellite later showed but which was too sensitive to be shared widely. These memories are small and easy to miss, but together they create a web of hints. They suggest that the full picture is not in public folders, but folded into private memory, into the vaults of old offices, into the heads of those who once read the files. Sometimes the stories are more direct. A viewer, years after leaving the program, tells a friend that they once described a place with rooms that opened onto rooms, and that the team reacted as if they had heard something true and strange. The viewer's life changed afterward. He moved to a quieter house. He stopped watching certain kinds of films. He did not ask for praise. He only wanted to sleep. These small confessions are not proof to a court, but they are real to the person who speaks them, and they carry weight in the social memory of the program. On the other side of that memory are the people who decide what's released. They are not always villains in a story. Often they are cautious managers who think about harm in a practical way. They worry that publishing everything could put lives at risk. They think about methods, about the chance of copycats, and about how public discussion could harm operations. Their choices are shaped by law, by security, and by the pressure to keep some tools quiet. That is why some records are opened and others are not. It is a slow human weighing of cost and benefit. Sometimes those choices are guided by other motives. Bureaucracies protect themselves. Offices do not want to be shocked into scrutiny. A sudden public revelation can bring angry questions, audits, and hard days under bright lights. When those pressures loom, people often choose the calm path. Keep the files closed and the questions quiet. That choice can seem sensible to some and deceptive to others. Either way, it shapes the story we do not fully see. There are also legal hoops and national rules that shape what becomes public. The same folder that a curious citizen requests may be blocked because it mentions a name tied to an ongoing operation, or because the wording could identify a vulnerable person. Those legal shields are sometimes essential and sometimes frustrating. They make the path to truth longer and harder to walk. For someone who wants to know everything, the world becomes a labyrinth of locked doors and polite refusals. Whistleblowers sometimes appear at those doors. They carry small packets of information and heavy hearts. When someone steps forward, the details can change the public story. Yet whistleblowing is rare and risky. People worry about careers, about legal trouble, about the damage to loved ones. So when whistleblowers speak, their stories matter. They often tell of things left out of official reports, sessions moved to smaller offices, sketches filed away, or a note on a page that simply reads "Review needed." Those notes look small on paper but carry heavy meaning for those who know how to read them. We must also think about plain human error. Some things are missing not because of design, but because people misfiled them, or because someone retired and took a key memory with them. History is not a neat line, but a messy pile of notebooks. The question, what else did they see, sometimes has an answer as simple as no one thought to keep it. That thought is both comforting and worrying. Comforting because it suggests some gaps are simple human mistakes. Worrying because it means truth may be lost and never recovered. There is another thread that runs through this question: story. People love to tell stories about the things they cannot explain. Those stories mix memory and imagination. They turn a sketch into a legend and a small surprise into a big mystery. As you listen, you must hold both kinds of truth: the official documents and the soft stories told over tea. The real picture lives between them. It is made of facts, memory, rumour, and quiet personal change. The choice about what the public is allowed to know is also a political one. Leaders decide what to declassify, when and how. They may release certain files to show that oversight works, but hold back others to avoid panic or to protect allies. The path of declassification is not straight. It curves with elections, with news cycles, and with the moods of those in charge. Often, a single line in a memo can decide whether a file is opened or sealed for another decade. Those lines are chosen by people with simple lives and fallible judgments. There are also ethical questions about what should be known. Suppose a document reveals that a viewer described a private home where innocent people lived. Even if that description is true, should the public hear it? The answer weighs privacy against the public interest. That is a hard balance. Some argue transparency is always best. Others argue for protection of the innocent. Those debates echo in the halls where declassification is decided. They are not easy debates, and they do not end in a single clear answer. Beyond files and managers, there are practical reasons to keep things quiet. The risk of copycats, the chance that bad actors will try to train people to misuse methods, and the real fear that release could cause harm. When officials think about those risks, they sometimes act to prevent harm, even if that prevention keeps the public from knowing the full truth. That kind of choice raises a hard question. Who can be trusted to hold the truth when it might harm? History gives no easy rule. For the curious listener, the unresolved nature of these questions creates a particular kind of pull. We want to know more, we want final pages, clear images, a tidy end. But real histories are often unfinished books with chapters still being written. This open-endedness can be restful if you accept it as part of living in a world that keeps some things quiet. It can also be frustrating when you crave closure. Either way, the not knowing becomes part of the story. There are small ways people search for answers. Researchers ask for files, journalists follow trails, and retired participants tell small parts of their memories. Each act uncovers a little more. Sometimes a single document, revealed after decades, sheds light on a rumour. Other times, files only deepen the question. A paragraph may confirm a detail but leave the deeper pattern hidden. That is how history often works. Slowly, in fragments. As you rest with these thoughts, let us return to a warm image. Picture an old office with a window that shows the last light of day. A retired analyst sits there and folds a paper carefully. He remembers a session that he never told anyone about. He hums a tune, places the paper back in the box and closes the lid. His choice to keep the memory is quiet and human. Not all secrets are kept by institutions. Many are kept by people who want to forget, or who fear harm, or who simply wish to sleep. Before we close this chapter, I will offer a small, gentle prompt to help keep you listening. Imagine the next page being opened. What would you hope to find there? A clear answer, a friendly face, an apology, a simple fact that makes sense of a strange memory. Hold that image softly. This sense of wonder is what keeps people returning to these stories. It is not always about proof. It is about the slow, careful work of undoing mystery with small acts of attention. We are not finished with this subject. There are many more chapters to unfold, places where we will look at individual cases with calm detail, at the moral questions raised by looking into the minds of others and at the ways these stories touch everyday life. For now, let the quiet of this chapter rest in you. Know that some answers are slow to come, and that is part of the shape of truth.